Welcome in, Loons fans, to another edition of the Matchday preview. Jonathan Harrison here. Normally, this is where I say joined by Manny Lagos, but as you heard at the end of last episode, he is out this week. So we are joined by Andy Greder of the Pioneer Press and Jon Marthaler of the Star Tribune, both two of the beat writers for Minnesota United, covering the team. Boys, how are we doing today? Plenty to discuss on this week's Matchday preview. Doing it a little bit early since we have a Friday game. I love Friday night soccer, so I'm looking forward to this, even if it is on July 4th, but plenty to discuss. Andy, John, how you guys doing?
Doing great. Looking forward to talking some soccer.
We need more Friday night soccer. I think that's one of the common themes of this podcast is more Friday night soccer.
More Friday night soccer because it brings more chaos. We always love MLS After Dark. Well, that just happens during Friday night soccer in general. And let's jump right into this. We got plenty to discuss. We'll start off with MLS action. We'll hit on a little bit of Club World Cup. We'll go to the Gold Cup action, which I know you guys were in attendance at this weekend. So we'll get your guys' thoughts on that. And then we'll jump into the New York Red Bulls match before previewing FC Dallas, Holstein Kiel, and Chicago Fire. We got plenty to discuss. We got about an hour to do it. So let's jump right in. MLS action from the weekend. Philadelphia fall to Columbus Crew. Philadelphia, top team in the Eastern Conference. Bit of a surprise that they fail to extend their lead atop the Supporters Shield race, but Columbus Crew getting a big 1-0 win, Andy, at the weekend, continuing to show that the Eastern Conference is incredibly competitive, incredibly deep at the top.
Yeah, when I looked at that game, I thought about Daniel Gazdag and thought about how he was doing, obviously because he's the biggest narrative street kind of person in that game. And it's interesting to see that he hasn't had a goal for Columbus yet. And they paid $4 million in a cash trade for him, and that hasn't paid off yet for him. But they were still able to get a win despite him not producing on the score sheet for him.
Yeah, surprising result there for Columbus. John, this was a weekend where we saw a bunch of players play their last games for their club because, as we know, the MLS calendar is in the middle of the yearly transfer window calendar for FIFA, and that means June 30th comes up, and that means contracts and loans end, and we'll talk about Felipe Carbaggio, who is involved in that as well. But we saw Olivier Giroud leaving LAFC after a disappointing run there. I think is
after a legendary 2-month career with LAFC.
Yeah, the news came out that he was going to leave, but then he still played a half. He still, I believe, started in that game or came on as a late game substitute, but still played in his final game for LAFC. Your guys' thoughts, John, I'll start with you on the Olivier Giroud experiment in LA. I would venture personally to say that it was a bit of a bust.
Well, I just missed the part where they already had Kai Kamara and then they brought in Olivier Giroud, the two guys. They're both their combined age of 99 years old. They both have scored for 11 separate clubs. It's having both of them in one team was just like one of those statistical things that between the two, now that they've been on the same team, you can now link every player in both Europe and MLS by less than 3 degrees of separation. You know what I mean? It's just somebody played with Olivier Giroud, who played with Kai Kamara, who played with everybody in MLS history. So I guess that's 4 degrees of separation. But it really seemed like it was only done based on trivia.
I think you're trying to be nice and not be a shock jockey and not talk about TFC and Bernadeschi and Insigne.
I was
burying the lead here. We're burying the lead on the bigger disappointments.
I was building up to the disappointment there. Before we get to that, I know that is the discussion du jour across MLS circles is what happened in Toronto and them getting rid of their Italians, and we'll get to that. But Andy, your thoughts on the Olivier Giroud experiment? It never seemed like it made sense based off how they wanted to play, and as John pointed out, his age. Olivier Giroud, not really the guy to play the counterattacking style that they want to play, and never really seemed like it was going to fit, and it never did.
No, he never did. And I think he played over 1,000 minutes over 2 seasons, and that isn't good enough when you're paying a guy $3.6 million. So, quite the bust there in LA. And Hugo Lloris, the former Spur, is without his fellow Frenchman. I don't know what he's going to do now.
Yeah, they that move's done. But as you pointed out, the biggest news talker of the week is Toronto FC moving on from Insigne and Bernadeschi in what may go down, John, as the worst designated player signings in all of Major League Soccer history. Just
I mean,
terrible from the start, and it never worked out.
There have been bad designated player signings before, bad big money most of them made by Austin FC somehow. I don't know how that's possible. But to do those two at once, it's rare you find two bigger names who came in and appeared to, near as I can tell, have the same problem, which is they had the sort of Gonzalo Higuain memorial. I don't have to do anything. This is MLS. This is not a league where I have to run around and kick the ball. Oh, wait. There is still a little bit of a requirement to run around and try, and apparently 10 million a year or whatever they were both getting paid wasn't quite enough for them to give a crap.
Yeah, just a shocking end result there. But this felt like it'd been building up for a while, Andy. I mean, you had the offseason incidents with Insigne not showing up essentially until, what, 6-7 weeks into the season, and then showing up and then just not really playing all that well. This felt like it's been coming for a very long time for Toronto.
Some of the most salacious journalism done in this league in the last 2 years was on the coup attempt that they had to try to get Bob Bradley out of TFC.
Yes.
And kind of their efforts to just, obfuscate and roadblock any sort of opportunity for Bob Bradley to be the coach there anymore. And they were successful, and they were still bad. So it worked out in their favor, and they were still, completely ineffectual in kind of what they were expected to do in this league. And I feel bad for Olivier Giroud in a way, because he didn't do any of that, and we're lumping him in with these kind of characters.
Poor Olivier Giroud tried his best and just wasn't good enough. And right. We're mentioning him in the same sentence with Insigne.
At least Giroud seemed to care at least a little bit, whereas these other two guys, they wanted out of here as soon as they got in. And this feels like a very big uphill climb for Robin Fraser, who's been thought of as this really big up and coming coach and had a good run for the first year anyway in Colorado. But it just seems like every time he's handed a job, the team around him kind of falls apart, whether it's because of him or not. It always seems like one uphill task after another for Robin Fraser, John.
Yeah, Colorado, by the time Fraser was done there, they were fielding teams with like 8 players because they just didn't have enough players left. And Colorado's fairly well known for not necessarily giving their all from top down. That's all I'll say about that. But
Toronto, that's what you decide to be diplomatic about?
I guess, I got hot take, and then I don't want to insult Colorado's terrible ownership. I don't know what I'm doing here. I say something and then you guys react, and I'm like, oh, I went too far with that one. Now I got to back off.
Well, I mean, you're an Arsenal guy, so I connect the dots because it's
that's true.
Team.
No, I also hate Arsenal
this.
Ownership, so that is another good reason to just absolutely. All right, Colorado's ownership is terrible.
Clip it.
And there we go. Andy pushed me. This is how it goes. I'm a nice guy until Andy starts pushing my buttons, and in the second half, I'll just be screaming into the camera from like this far away.
I hope so.
Andy, you got him more mad than when we talk about the Galaxy. You got him more triggered when we talk.
Wait, we don't have a Galaxy part of this coming? I got more things to yell about.
I mean, they drew against San Jose at the weekend, and Jerry Rice was there in attendance, and of course the name bug. I don't know if you guys saw this. The name bug when he popped up on the screen said Jerry Rice, Earthquakes fan. That's his claim to fame, is Earthquakes fan.
That's the first thing I think of.
Just because he was there, does that make him an Earthquakes fan, or is he like legitimately? I'm skeptical of that. Quite skeptical. Apple TV, it wouldn't be the first thing Apple TV wrong flubbed.
Jerry Rice, maybe one of the greatest American athletes of all time. No, we're not going to recognize
Jerry
that.
Rice, soccer attendee.
He was available.
Neutral.
Jerry Rice, available.
As for the Galaxy, they came back and rescued a 1-1 draw in the Cali Clasico. John,
or as we call it, a Galaxy win.
At this point, John, your favorite, Bo LaRue scoring in the 16th minute for San Jose to give them an early lead in that one. Elsewhere across the Western Conference, San Diego continues winning in impressive fashion, continuing to stay atop the Western Conference. Andy, we saw the San Diego team a couple weeks ago at Allianz Field showing out why they are at the top of the Western Conference, why they're not just another debut team that's going to have a rough season. They are pulling a St. Louis and having a really good debut season and showing that they belong at the top of the West.
Yeah, I turned on that game after I filed my game story for the Red Bulls match, and turned on just in time for stoppage time, and it was all Dallas for the first 5 minutes of stoppage time, and then San Diego scored. So it was looking like it was going to be a 2-2 draw, and Dallas was going to get a couple of points off of them. But San Diego continues to pull rabbits out of their hat and continue to, like you said, sit atop of the West.
Continues to pull off some impressive performances in a tough run of schedule. Minnesota, they played Seattle. I believe they played Vancouver recently, and they've gotten wins or draws out of pretty much all those contests, John. This is a team that is staking itself and claiming itself as potentially the best team in the West in their first year. And that's going to be a really difficult place to play, not just because it's a difficult team to play, but also the turf. We know that there's some issues there with that field over the past year and a half since Snapdragon Stadium came into being, but this is a really good team that plays a really good brand of soccer and is really hard to beat.
Yeah, I mean, San Diego beat Minnesota and Vancouver on the road back-to-back games, and I feel like I said a couple of months ago on this podcast, like I was already sick of San Diego. Oh, the plucky upstart story. Well, I feel like everybody's joining me now. Like, oh, they're not plucky underdogs. They win every week, and if you haven't started hating them, just if you're a hockey fan, they're the Las Vegas Golden Knights of MLS. So if you hate the Golden Knights, you can also hate San Diego. Which is worse, the field at Snapdragon Stadium or the field at US Bank Stadium?
You guys tell me, you guys were there in person.
Near the end, it just looked like it wasn't really grass anymore, just clumps. Like there were enough chunks taken out that if the ball lands on the chunks, it'll be hard to control. But if the ball lands on the places where the chunks came out, like if a golf course, but nobody ever replaced the divot for 4 years.
So are you saying that was Calvo's fault for missing that penalty?
I think it's fair to say that there's nothing that can't really all of Minnesota history and in a way all of MLS history that can't be traced back somehow to Francisco Calvo.
Well, let's jump into the Gold Cup conversation since we're already there. You guys, I believe you both were in attendance there at US Bank Stadium on Sunday for Guatemala pulling off the shock of the tournament against Canada, and then the US hanging on and squeaking past Costa Rica. Your guys' overall thoughts on the day, what you saw in those games. Andy, I'll start with you.
I think number one was just the turnout from the Guatemala fans. I wasn't really expecting to see them be the loudest, deepest, most boisterous fan group of the four. More than the Americans, even more than the American Outlaw supporters, they were by far the best
By
of
far.
us. And I thought that was really cool to see. You could see it outside the stadium before the game, and it was 8 or 9 to 1 compared to Canada in that match. So I thought that was probably the coolest thing. Maybe the biggest surprise was how Dane St. Clair wasn't able to make a save in the penalty kick shootout. There were a couple early on that looked like he got a fingertip on or went underneath them, and Minnesota United fans are so used to him coming up with those saves. Obviously, in the Real Salt Lake playoff series last year, that kind of expect him to get at least one, and he was kind of kicking himself, feeling like he let his team down. So I think that was maybe the surprise in that first game.
John?
Yeah, I mean, those Guatemala fans, and I'm not even just talking about the people who sat in the row in front of me in the press box. I'm talking about the whole stadium overall.
We have
It
to talk about that, by the way.
um, it was wild. It was genuinely raucous in there. And I was like everybody, I thought, well, this will sort of be a home game for Canada. How many Canadian fans are travel? If you counted everybody, if you're counting jerseys and you counted every Canadian t-shirt plus every Minnesota United jersey as a Canadian jersey, like assuming they were cheering for St. Clair and Oluwaseyi, it still would have been like Andy said, 10 to 1, 20 to 1. It was unbelievable, Guatemala's turnout. And in terms of noise, every Guatemala fan made more noise than any 20 American fans put together. It was unreal. It was a great atmosphere. And the second game was honestly kind of terrible after that Guatemala game. So it was like, wow, everybody's quiet. And are they paying attention? Are these leftover fans that are just not watching this game? Like, what is happening here? It's so quiet. Whereas the Guatemala game, the whole thing was just screaming.
I will say, watching both those games on TV, it genuinely came through the TV set how loud it was at US Bank Stadium, and how raucous that Guatemala fan base was. And you could tell, as John, you pointed out, the difference between that first game and the second game, where it was loud, boisterous, felt like a party atmosphere coming through the TV in the first game. The second game, it felt very quiet coming through, and didn't feel like what you expected after the first game.
I'm just going to say, if anybody from U.S. Soccer is listening to this, do not, and I say this again, do not schedule Guatemala to play a World Cup qualifier at Allianz Field. It will not go the way you think it is. I don't care how cold it is. You are going
Yeah.
to play a road game if you play Guatemala in Minnesota, as it turns out.
Well, hasn't it been that way since the entire tournament? Guatemala's fan base has kind of traveled with them and shown up every place they've gone, it seems like, according to reporters. It's
Maybe they're
been
just making new fans. I want to be a Guatemala fan now.
they're fun to watch, that's for
I'm
sure.
gonna
I
I'm gonna
mean,
pull a Rubio Rubin. I used to be American, now I'm Guatemalan.
and Aaron Herrera.
Yep,
Let's talk
let's
about
do
these
it.
games. Let's dive into them. We'll start Guatemala, Canada. Where did this one turn for you? I've got my opinions, but where did this one turn for you guys? Obviously, the red card is going to be the talking point for that game for a very long time. But Andy, I'll start with you. What were the differences and what was the changing points for Canada in this one in losing this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it absolutely starts with the red card, right? I think when you get a yellow card or whatever, Jacob Shackelberg got his first one in at 40 minutes, and then you get a second one at 45 where you just
Ugh.
bulldoze a guy. That's pretty boneheaded to be doing that and to force your team that, was probably on the front foot to have to, fight and scratch and claw like they did in the second half was difficult to watch, and they were still in control, and then that cross and header that beat Dane was kind of a one-off kind of moment, and that's all they really needed to force into PKs.
John?
Yeah, I mean, forget. I don't know if this is the first CONCACAF game that Jacob Schaffelberg ever played in, but is this the first one he ever saw, ever? Like at any level? What do you think is going to happen when even if you don't make any contact with the guy, which he did make contact, but even if you don't make any contact, that guy's going to go down like he shot him in the face with a crossbow. You know what's going to happen. You've seen CONCACAF games before. You gotta be. I know Jesse Marsh is screaming at you from the sideline, and you've been hearing this all week, but you got to be a little smarter than that to not go piling into something like that. Just like, you know, get to halftime and let the manager substitute for you or something. Just don't be an idiot.
And it was in the dumbest position on the field too. It was
Dumbest
that boy
position.
line. It was a ball going backwards. It was just not well positioned at all or
Even
timed.
if he had won it, it made no difference whatsoever. Even if it hadn't been a red card, which it was.
How big of a disappointment is this for Canada? Because they came in and everybody talked about how they were the favorites coming into this tournament. And that was probably the first time they've been favorites in a very long time. The talk is they haven't obviously won a trophy in over 25 years since last time they won the Gold Cup. So obviously there was a lot of pressure on them. How big of a disappointment is this for Canada heading into the World Cup next year where they'll be one of the three hosts, Andy?
I think it is a disappointment for sure. And Dane St. Clair, before he left, talked about it. He was like, okay, I'm going to play in the final of the Gold Cup. And then 2 days later, I'm going to be back in Minnesota for a US Open Cup game against Chicago. He had already planned out what his summer was going to look like. He was very expectant of being in that spot. I do want to touch on Jesse Marsh for a second because Jesse talked
Mhm.
about how no one was calling him up and everybody was included in his team. And then after he loses in the Gold Cup game to Guatemala, he says half of his team isn't there. So which is it, Jesse? I'm a little confused on what's going on here. Are you kind of building in some excuses for what's happening? Obviously, Alfonso Davies is probably the number one person, but that's due to
Yeah.
injury, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I think it is a disappointment. I think anytime that you're in a spot where you don't have to qualify for the World Cup and you're in a tournament that means something, even if it is just the Gold Cup, I think you have to put your best foot forward and go out and try to win a trophy. And when you fall short without those qualifiers, it looms a little bit more.
Yeah, when you start off the tournament with a 6-0 win over Honduras, and then it kind of all goes downhill from there. It feels like nothing ever really got back up to that level, John. The pressure's going to mount, and obviously those comments from Jesse Marsh have been out there. He's taken a lot of criticism over the last couple days. How much of the blame for what Canada did or didn't do, I guess, at the Gold Cup lies on Jesse Marsh's shoulders?
I don't I feel bad for Canada because it's a little bit like asking, do you think the Vikings are disappointed they didn't win the Super Bowl again this year? Well, yeah, but they're also kind of used to it. So I don't I don't quite know how to feel about that. And it's the same way with like, who is the blame? Maybe Canada is the blame. Like they've had some good teams and never gotten through, and this just feels like another. It must, if you're a Canadian fan, it must just feel like yet another one to just add to disappointment after disappointment after going back a quarter century. It just I I keep coming back to comparing them to Vikings fans because it's like, well, is this worse than that one or is it worse than that? Like, where does this rank in the bad? It's not even, I don't even have time to feel sad about it. I just have to, well, where do I file this one among all of the frustration that I've seen?
Yeah, it's been an interesting debate watching play out on who's to blame for what Canada did at the Gold Cup. Shifting perspectives, U.S. men's national team squeak out a penalty kicks win over Costa Rica. I think or you guys tell me if I'm off base here. Is it safe to say that Matt Freese is the number one goalkeeper for the U.S. heading into the World Cup next year, Andy?
I think so. I think, when you look at Matt Turner, who hasn't been able to get club games, and the fact that Matt Freese makes 3 stops in the penalty kick shootout and has kind of put the team on his shoulders to reach the semifinals and given what else is out there. And I think, yeah, I think you ride what's happening right now. Obviously, we're in this moment right now. We'll see what happens, on Wednesday night against Guatemala, and if they make the final against Mexico. I think there's a lot to be said, but in this moment in time, I think he's the number one.
John, your takeaways from what you saw the U.S. do against Costa Rica, battling out to a 2-2 draw. Our old friend Francisco Calvo was deeply involved in that match, as we all expected it to be him to be in the game in Minnesota, of course. What were your takeaways from that game? How confident are you going into the game against Guatemala tonight as of recording?
My main takeaway was that for a while in the first half, after Francisco Calvo, his penalty was the difference in a 1-0 game. For a while, the phrase "he threw me in the trash like a rookie" was about to get printed in the Minnesota Star Tribune again. And I think we can all be a little bit disappointed that events intervened and we didn't end up. I didn't end up having to build a U.S. men's national team game story around the saga of Francisco Calvo. I personally was disappointed about that. As far as the team, I was a little surprised listening to the post game and stuff about how much Mauricio Pochettino leaned into like we just want these guys to have an experience. We want to make, we want to always make sure they're learning. And on the one hand, that's coaching. That's like the kind of thing you hear from coaching. On the other hand, it's a little surprised that 1 year out from the World Cup, the U.S. men's national team manager sounds like he's coaching an under-17 team. You know what I mean? Like, well, we just wanted these guys to have an experience and try to build. I get why. I get what they're at, what this team is at the Gold Cup and what they're trying to do and that sort of stuff. It just was a little bit like, well, I know it's good that they won this penalty shootout, but also Costa Rica is not great. Their best player is older than Olivier Giroud and playing in goal. I, if Francisco Calvo is taking first half penalties for your team, how good of a team do you have? Let's put it that way. And they were missing their best player. Their best striker was on the bench with yellow card accumulation. So I don't know. If they lose to Guatemala tonight, it won't necessarily be a shock because they're not that much better than everybody right now.
Do you expect them? I guess, Andy, what are your expectations? What are your predictions for tonight? U.S. Guatemala, which I'm sure will probably be another Guatemala home match because that's what it's been the entire Gold Cup for them. And then Mexico, Honduras, closing out the evening. What are your expectations and predictions for those two matches?
I mean, it's probably going to be pretty boring, but I'm going to take the chalk and go U.S. Mexico. I think it's probably going to be the end of the road for Guatemala, even though it's been a nice tournament. I just think the U.S. team is better. Obviously, they're going to St. Louis, so I think it'd be interesting to see what that crowd is like. Right? It's Energizer Park, so it's an MLS stadium, so it's about 20,000. How do those tickets be distributed? But I think the U.S. will get it done, and I think Mexico will get it done against Honduras. I know this isn't hot takey, but I just think it's going to be chalk.
John?
Yeah, it always feels at the Gold Cup like it does not matter who Mexico plays. Like if you put Argentina, Brazil, Germany, England, and Italy in the Gold Cup, Mexico would find a way for a 1-0 win and a 2-1 penalty shootout win. It just doesn't matter. As long as they're playing in the Gold Cup, they'll find a way to the final. That's just how it goes for Mexico at the Gold Cup. That's what it feels like to me, at least. And I mean, I, that was the thing about the Guatemala match. Maybe if Diego Luna goes crazy and gets 2 first half yellow cards, Guatemala can pull off another one in front of their home fans in St. Louis.
Outside of Matt Freese, from what you guys have seen in this tournament, have any other players played themselves into the roster coming up for the World Cup next summer? Andy?
I think probably Malik Tillman probably would be up there. I think he's been noticed on a club stage as well, as in the reports of Bayer Leverkusen making an
40
offer.
million or something like that.
Yeah, so I think he's probably a guy that's really kind of increased his stock this summer.
John, Diego Luna play well enough for you to earn a call up, or
I mean, irrespective of how much he plays, I keep finding out adorable things about Diego Luna. Like, I just found that this was probably well known among everybody who's listening to this podcast, but apparently when he started his pro soccer career, he felt like he wasn't relating with people, so he got a job as a barista just so that he could practice his social skills. Like, that's adorable. And he looks like he would knife you, and yet he's the most adorable person ever. You know what I mean? He's got the facial tattoos and stuff. He looks scary, and yet he wears orange and blue socks, or at least for a while last year, he wore orange and blue shoes, I think, during games because his kids love Bluey. And the two main characters in Bluey are orange and blue. That's adorable. There's nothing I don't love about Diego Luna. And he just runs around pinging into people and bouncing off walls and making stuff happen. It's fun. He's fun in a U.S. men's national team that has so rarely had fun players. Like you're like, oh, Frankie Hedgick runs funny. He's fun. And he'll jump into the stands and drink with people.
And he clearly cares. I mean, you could see
yeah,
that
yeah.
from the press box, just how much he's putting out there on the field. I'd imagine he probably has that same care with the barista and asking for
Yes.
spellings of names on the cup,
Absolutely.
The
He's
detail
not
that
going to
goes
just
into
put
it.
if,
Yeah.
if your name starts with J or John, no matter what you say after the
Yeah.
name, he's not going to do that. He's going to
Yeah.
get it
Is it
right.
Ryan or is it Brian? He's going to figure it out.
Yeah, he's going to get it right.
I mean, he had 3 teammates on his team, all named Brian, all spelled differently. So you'd imagine this guy is used to having to learn how to spell names properly.
It's like Minnesota and guys who are named Kevin or something near Kevin.
Ready to join the next generation of Loons? All fans 12 and under can join Minnesota United's Kids Club. We've got 2 membership options that can get you team swag, special perks, and the chance to win some exclusive opportunities like attending MNUFC training. Visit MNUFC.com for more info. So the results at the weekend in the Gold Cup, with Honduras beating Panama, a bit of an upset there, according to some predictions, and Canada going out at the weekend as well, mean the Loons will get Dane St. Clair, Tani Loache, and Carlos Harvey back at the weekend a little bit earlier than I think many Loons fans expected them, which will certainly be a help against Dallas, but we'll get to that game in a little bit. Andy, let's start off. New York Red Bulls, Minnesota United, a 2-2 draw between these two teams. A very fun one, very back and forth. There's some positives, there's some negatives. There's plenty to discuss on this one. Where do you want to start on this match?
I thought it was interesting to hear Eric Ramsey before the match talk about how there would be Red Bull sending in runners in behind, and that's exactly how they scored their goals. He was very prophetic in that kind of assessment, and that's how it played out. And much to Michael Boxall's dismay, because he was kind of at the crux of both of those goals. So I think it was kind of some poor defending for the Loons that was kind of uncharacteristic for them.
John, your thoughts on 2-2 New York Red Bulls, Minnesota United at the weekend?
I was kind of surprised. This is something Ramsey mentioned after the game, but it looked like it was super hot there, and I don't remember. I don't know if I never actually checked
temperatures or just the temperament of Sandro Schwartz.
Well, the temperature in the stadium goes up 10 degrees because Sandro Schwartz is there just screaming. Did you see? I don't know if you saw the press release, but he got fined for sprinting after the referee afterwards. And I'm going to quote from the press release here. He got fined for irresponsible behavior, which I feel like is number one, it fits perfectly. Number two, I didn't know you could get fined for your irresponsible behavior, but yeah, that's right.
I love Brian Korsted's assessment that he was out there in a bed shirt.
Yes.
Thought that was pretty good.
He did. He looked like he should have one of those hats that just is folded over with like the little pom-pom on the end of it.
Dan and I were questioning on the radio call how security knew that he was the coach and not just some random fan just jumping onto the field at the end of the match with how he was dressed.
That's right.
Because he was screaming and, going crazy on the sideline the whole game. So they knew who he was because he's in the coach's box going nuts the previous 90 minutes.
I'd
He's the
seen him the
guy who
entire.
there was a throw in that could have gone either way, and he tried to punch the fourth official because he just cannot get a hold of himself.
That was one of the more wild coaching experiences I've seen in a very long time. And we can get to all of that. This one started early, obviously. The early goal for New York Red Bulls, as you said, runners in behind. It felt like early on, guys, that New York Red Bulls, and I know we talked about this last week, Manny and I did, how good the Red Bulls are at home. So everybody should have went in expecting a very tough game for Minnesota United, and New York Red Bulls really kind of pressing Minnesota early, pushing and controlling the game very early on. And that led to that opening goal. It felt very much like the Loons were a little bit slow out of the gates, Andy.
Yeah, absolutely. They were. I think it was interesting to see kind of afterwards, and this is kind of jumping ahead, but after Caputo Muting scores his game tying goal, I asked Ramsey about kind of the necessity that they have to defend all the time. And Eric Ramsey's been so protective about their possession numbers, but he was open to saying, hey, it's because we don't control the ball long enough. We don't release the pressure on our defense enough. And that was the first time because he deals with so many questions about possession numbers and he's so protective of them. To have him kind of open up in that way was, I thought, pretty revealing about how this team still has limitations when it comes to that.
Yeah, and I think it's a fair assessment after that game is you can't defend as deep as they were and as often as they were for as long as they were, John. And obviously, the questions, as Andy pointed out, have been constant about the possession and the need for a second avenue of gameplay for Minnesota United, and that came to fruition on Saturday evening.
Yeah, I feel like we're about two or three more late goals, and until Ramsey just snaps in the post-game press conference and it's like, yeah, it'd be nice if our guys could kick the ball to each other anytime in the last 20 minutes. Just any sort of pass completed would be great. I would really like to see that. I feel, a couple more and he finally might go, 10% Sandro Schwartz and just lose it a little bit.
I'm curious what it would take to see that side of Eric Ramsey.
Wouldn't
We've
you,
never seen it.
wouldn't you be terrified if you saw Eric Ramsey just loses behavior like that? Be like, oh no, it's like your dad is mild mannered and then he just starts screaming at you and you're like, I think I have to move out of the house now. Like
You'll really know you screwed up once you get
I,
Eric Ramsey screaming at you.
I think I'm getting kicked out. Like the one good teacher in school that's always nice is screaming at you like, I have to transfer schools now. I can't come back here. What is happening?
uh, as disappointing as the end result was, I think you can also say that there are some positives to glean from this match, and the fact that a lot of conversation outside of possession has been how this team will respond once going down because they've spent the least amount of time in the league trailing games. And we saw that early on with the Forsberg goal in the 11th minute, but then Minnesota responding after a bit of delay due to the injury to Vessel Spiel. And we can talk about the goalkeeper situation coming up next, but the Loons responding, getting a goal in the 32nd minute. And then just before halftime as well, Anthony Markanek scoring yet another goal, John, as he continues to outpace his brother in the scoring charts.
I'm not with every week that goes by, I'm more and more convinced it's not Anthony Markanek in the lineup anymore. How would we tell? How would we know? With every great finish, I become more and more convinced that call his dad, call his mom. How do you tell these guys apart? We need to know for sure that this is Anthony and not Nick that we're dealing with here.
It has been an impressive run, but it was good to see that bit from the Loons club that hasn't really been tested like that in being forced to come back from a game or from behind early on, Andy, and they were able to do it. They were able to battle some adversity in the middle of the match and find a way to get back into a game in a very tough environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you look at the fact that they were missing the players that they were, right? You talk about not being able to connect a pass in the last 20 minutes. Well, Daniel O'Shea's hold-up play would have been pretty important there. I think if you can wonder if Dane St. Clair is able to kind of come off his line and stop the Emil Forsberg goal before it even happens and stop Choupo-Moting from kind of getting that kind of awkward collision. You kind of wonder if Dane St. Clair's around, if they don't have more points in these last two games. I think that's pretty clear that if you don't have that drop off from an all-star to a rookie, are you able to come away with even more points in this setting? But I think overall to go on the road and get a point, I think it's positive in the long run. But I think in the fashion that it happens, giving up a late goal, I think is always going to stick with me as more points drop just because of when it happens.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that was the overwhelming sentiment after the match. Is there was disappointment that you couldn't find a way to see out your 2-1 lead, get 3 points on the road. But then, as the coaching staff will always point out, you're getting a point on the road. You'll always take that no matter how they come. And I think it's fair to say, John, that there are some positives, but you're also disappointed with the way, as Andy said, the way it resulted in the final minutes of that match.
Yeah, I thought it was telling that Ramsey after the game said what he told the players was, listen, it's disappointing and I'm disappointed and it's raw and everything, but if this was last year, we would have lost that game. And instead we got a point. And it's been kind of funny. We've been asking about June and this whole period, the whole year, and it's been sort of downplayed. I think we're in a better place, he would say, but as it's happening, you can tell just how traumatic last summer was for everybody. It's like everything we do, we lose no matter what we do. We score 2 goals, we lose. We give up 1 goal, we lose. No matter we're up 2-1 on DC United and we lose in stoppage time. And it just everything went wrong for so long that clearly it's like, well, we didn't do that we didn't do what we did last year. We got a win and a draw. This is amazing for them.
Was it
Yeah.
after the San Diego game or after the Houston game where he talked about the scars of last summer?
Yeah.
And the way that he talked about it makes me feel like they're still open wounds. Like there's not a lot of healing that's been going
There's
on.
no scar tissue.
Yeah,
These bandages
still
are
bandaged.
changed regularly.
It's
Yeah.
just a festering wound still. They're still feeling the repercussions from that one for sure. And you can tell every time you talk to them and how much that kind of hangs over them and not wanting to repeat. What happened in the middle of last year was a 9-game stretch without a win and almost tanked their season. They were able to come back after a bit of a break after a Leagues Cup exit. But yeah, you can tell how much that's kind of played into Eric Ramsey's thinking with match or squad rotation in the month of May and what they were able to do in that month. And that leaves us with that 2-2 draw. Where do you guys stand before we move on to the preview section of this podcast? Where do you stand on when the whistle blew at the end of the match? Should New York have been allowed to continue on with that fast break, or did we all just go into that last corner kick, assuming whatever happens here, this is the final kick no matter what? John, I'll start with you.
I didn't even think that Minnesota was going to get to take the corner. So I was a little bit surprised they took the corner. I was not surprised to see them blow the whistle. I should not have been surprised to see Sandro Swartz trying to hunt down the official and rugby tackle him. I shouldn't have been surprised. I saw everything else he said during the game, but it seemed reasonably normal to me. Maybe I'm the crazy one. Maybe Sandro Swartz is the only normal one.
Well, they put 4 minutes up, right? And it was well after 5. I just think that the whistle should have blown a couple of seconds before that, because when you wait those couple of seconds, you're like, oh, here comes a transition, here comes an odd man break, and you're like, oh, okay, and then the whistle comes. If you just blow it a couple seconds before that, you kind of nip any sort of controversy in the bud.
And the reason to extend the game can't be because I want it to be extended. That's not a good reason to keep having stoppage time. Why should he have kept going? Because I wanted to see what would happen. I thought we were going to score a goal. That's not the reason. That's not how this works, Sandro Swartz.
Yeah. 4 minutes is 4 minutes, and they were at what, 5:30, 6 o'clock, 6 minutes after at that point. And as we said on the call, it felt like that corner kick, if it was about to be taken, was going to be the last kick no matter what. So the fact that they even got to go on a fast break and have this controversy is I guess it's on the referee that they waited that long. Now on to the match at hand on Friday night, little Friday night soccer. Minnesota United heading down to Dallas, where I think the average temperature at this time of the year is about 92 degrees, but it feels a lot hotter than that because it's Texas. We'll have some July 4th soccer. Minnesota United at FC Dallas, a side in Dallas that have really struggled at home. Just 1 win on the season at home, 6 losses, 2 draws in Frisco, Texas this season. John, what should we expect from Friday night soccer? A Dallas side that is playing in a half-empty stadium because half their stadium is under construction and it's the TV side, so it's going to look completely empty. And this is a Minnesota side that's played pretty well on the road this season. This feels like it could be a trap game if there ever was one.
Yeah, it's a huge difference for FC Dallas to not have a lot of fans in the stands opposite the camera. I don't know what it'll be a weird experience seeing nobody in the stands in mid-July in FC Dallas. I don't quite know what to say
On a Friday night.
Yeah, it's Dallas is one of those teams, and you saw this when Dallas came to Minnesota. You saw that it was just sort of they dragged Minnesota into a little bit of a rock fight and just managed to keep it close. And maybe that's what they'll do. Maybe they'll be a little more expansive playing at home. I don't know what to expect. They have Lucho Acosta, so as long as he's around, everything will be fine for them in terms of creating something.
Lucho Acosta, future U.S. men's national team player, if the reports of Mauricio Pochettino talking to him at the game this weekend were true. Andy?
It'd be nice if we could just move on to naturalizing Argentinian guys rather than German guys. It's like Jurgen Klinsmann, but with Argentinian guys.
Andy, you don't want to see Lucho Acosta in a U.S. men's national team jersey?
I mean, it would be kind of nice, but isn't he a little bit past his prime? Like, I don't know.
You think, yeah?
I mean, how many retreads do we need to try to dig up? It's like,
I think it's time for Javier Mascherano to play for the U.S. men's national team.
Yeah, that was a weird one that I saw at the weekend, and I know that's been kind of bubbling for a while, even going back to the FC Cincinnati days. But as you said, Lucho Acosta still pretty good for them. Peter Musa, 7 goals, 3 assists on the season. They've got some attacking talent. It's just putting it all together has been their difficulty. What's it? 2 losses, 1 win, 2 draws in their last 5 matches. It hasn't been a good season for them. Obviously, down in 11th place. 5 points out of the last playoff spot, Andy. This is a Dallas side that has really struggled this season.
You can go back even further. I think they got 1 win in their last 9. So I think it's been a struggle. And when I watched their game against San Diego, it's like seeing those tarps over the seats. I was like, is this COVID? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
It's like, I understand that they're doing like $200 million in renovations, but why are we doing it in the middle of the season like this? It just doesn't make any sense. Like, why aren't you doing this construction in the winter, given how much MLS teams rely on gate receipts? It just feels like a really poorly timed renovation.
They got to get this done before high school football season. That's when FC Dallas makes their money.
Where else is that stadium gonna make its money back if they aren't able to host the D2 or D1 AA national championship game every year?
Where's North Dakota State gonna go?
Where are Bison fans gonna go in January?
Are they putting in stages for performances on 2 more sides of the field? Is that what they're doing with this renovation?
I think they're adding to the U.S. Soccer Hall of Fame, are they not? Not adding to the stadium, they're adding to the Hall of Fame.
Adding to the Hall of Fame, it's just nothing but Hall of Fame on one side.
Yes.
Put in some awnings so people don't cook in the middle of the summer.
Oh,
that's right.
Goodness. I couldn't.
Maybe a roof, guys. Just, I'm just throwing ideas out there.
Yeah. It's the first of a couple games in between this podcast and the next time we get together to record. That game coming up, 7:55 kickoff on Friday night between Minnesota United and FC Dallas. Games on Fox. You can watch that one. 7:30 pre-match show with Dan Terrar and myself. A little bit shorter of a pre-match show with the different kickoff time than we're used to for that one between Minnesota United and FC Dallas this Friday night. Also on Apple TV as well. Coming up on Monday, though, quick turnaround for the Loons, part of the Loons squad, I would imagine. Previewing now the Holstein Kiel friendly coming up on Monday, which takes place a day before the U.S. Open Cup quarterfinal against Chicago. Interesting bit of scheduling, just obviously just kind of the quirks of it all. You schedule the friendly and the quarterfinal just happens to be the next day. So this will be an interesting one to see, but there is the connection. John Tolkien, who's playing for the U.S. men's national team, normally plays for that side a Bundesliga club. Should be an interesting one for fans to come out to, Andy.
Yeah, I feel bad for the Holstein Kiel PR team because they've been trying to get me to join a roundtable with John Tolkien, and I'm like, doesn't really move the needle for me. I don't think I'm going to be joining that call. I feel bad for them, and I know they're just doing their job, but John Tolkien doesn't really do it for me, and I don't know how much this match is going to do it for Loons fans. Obviously, I think a friendly is always going to be difficult, but this isn't an English Premier League team. This is a team that got promoted from the second Bundesliga or got relegated down to the second Bundesliga.
Relegated to Bundesliga too. Yeah.
Yeah.
If Tolkien still had the mullet, the blonde mullet.
I commented on how I miss John Tolkien on New York Red Bulls because him and Emil Forsberg gave me flashbacks to 80s hair metal bands.
And that one quickly followed up, as I said, John. U.S. Open Cup quarterfinal against Chicago Fire, which Chicago are incredible away from Soldier Field, 6-4-0 on the season. When they're playing at Soldier Field, 2-3-4. So they're awful at home, but incredible away from home. This is a Fire side that is really weird. When they're on, as we put in the notes, when they're on, they're absolutely on. I mean, they've They've had some impressive results this season. They've beaten DC United 7-1, but when they're off, it's bad. They've lost to Nashville SC 7-2. So you don't know what you're going to get with Greg Berhalter's new side.
I mean, this is a huge improvement for the Chicago Fire in that they're
Yes,
not bad all the time.
that is
Like
true.
when they're on, they're on. You haven't been able to say about that about the Chicago Fire since about 1998. So that's good for them. And I will say this about the friendly of the day before. If you have a Loons jersey and you usually wear a Loons jersey to the game, if you also own soccer cleats, I would bring them if you're going to that game because there's every chance you'll get to play in the second half. Like just point your, show up, run around like by the bench, and if they hear the cleats sort of clacking in the hallway, it'll be like maybe might call you down and you can get a couple of minutes and for the Minnesota United first team. So I'll tell you now, that's your chance. And as far as Chicago, like you say, you have no idea what to expect exactly. They could absolutely blow Minnesota's doors off. It wouldn't necessarily be a surprise. And yet, who knows? Who knows with Chicago?
We know the Open Cup hasn't really gotten a lot of attention lately over the past handful of years, and it's still growing in prominence. How big is this matchup and how big is this tournament for the Loons to keep winning and keep going on to get their first trophy, Andy?
I think when you look at the fact that they've got hosting privileges for the
Yeah.
next 3 games, including the final, I think you kind of see a path that they can win their first trophy. And I think the club realizes that this is the clearest, most obvious path to be able to do so. And I think you see that in the club's promotion of tickets and fireworks afterwards to try to get more fans there. I wonder if it's going to somehow get over 3 or 5,000, but they're really trying to. I don't think it's going to. I agree with your shaking of your head, John, but
No, that's not why I was shaking my head. That's not
oh,
at all. Keep
okay.
going, but then I'll say what I have to say.
Um, but yeah, I think the club realizes that this is an opportunity to win a trophy, and I think you saw that in their last game. They put out a very strong team, so I think they're really going to be focused on trying to get this done.
Yeah, I was
Done.
just shaking my head because I mean, the last game they played in the US Open Cup was St. Louis. It was maybe the best game of the year. Two late goals from Anthony Marcanic to come back in front of, 2,000 fans or whatever. I really don't understand why. I love the US Open Cup. I don't understand why it's not more popular with fans. So I'm just going to throw this out there. If you're not going on Tuesday, maybe you don't like sports very much. Maybe you just don't like seeing teams compete for trophies. Like it's a playoffs. This is the quarterfinals. They're 3 games away from winning a trophy and qualifying for CONCACAF Champions. Like this seems like it should be a huge deal, but I thought that last round and nobody showed up. So I don't understand. I'm sure, it's hard to plan. It's a Tuesday night, whatever. I get it. There's other things going on. I have 45 kids of my own. I understand what it's like to have stuff going on, but I really don't get why nobody came out to the last one.
Oftentimes they look at how quickly the turnaround is in the schedule, right? They
Yeah.
win and then 2 weeks later they play. So this one has had a full month to be able to do so, and they've been promoting the heck out of it. So to your point, it's really on the fans if they want to support this club to show up and do so.
Yeah. That's what Andy's saying. Maybe you don't like the Loons. Maybe that's what's going on here, fans. Maybe you don't actually care.
I'm gonna share my
That's
home
right. I'm going
address.
with the passive aggressive dad guilt trip right now. Maybe you don't love your mother.
Yeah, you started it,
Maybe
John.
maybe
I'm
the
with
way
you.
you behave is because you don't love your mom actually at all.
I love the Open Cup.
Angry Eric Ramsey's coming after you.
Goodness.
Believe me, if angry Eric Ramsey comes after you, you have pushed it too far, people.
You've brought it up upon yourself if that happens.
That's right.
I'm looking forward to this one. I love the Open Cup like you, John. It's a fun tournament. It's a great tournament, historic tournament that it's a trophy. Anytime you get a chance to compete for a trophy, you should absolutely go out and try and win that trophy. And with the path that's laid out in front of them, with the hosting advantage or the hosting rights essentially through the next couple of rounds, and with the rest of the teams in it, you should absolutely go into this thinking that you'll get to that final and play whoever comes from the eastern side of that final or that bracket, and you should hope that, or you should expect to win that one. So there's plenty of opportunity for them to go into this one.
I mean, honestly, if you look back at the whole history of Minnesota soccer going back to 1990, how many times have they been within 3 games of a trophy? Like 10, 9, 10? Few U.S. Open Cup runs, the MLS's back tournament, the League's Cup, a couple times in MLS Cup, that's twice or whatever. I'm grasping at straws here because there's not that many. There's not that many where they've made it this far at anything, and I don't know. I don't know.
If they lose, are the fireworks still on?
Yes.
That would be weird. That would be
I think
weird
that-
if they lose
think
and there's
once
still
you-
fireworks.
Final
So-
score: Chicago 7, Minnesota 1.
From
Yeah.
what I understand, once you set fireworks, you have to launch them. You can't just like
Yeah.
not fire them. There's something about the way
This
fireworks
is
work.
this situation. This is completely off topic, but the Gophers, when they lost to North Carolina on the Dragan Kesich kick, and they still let off the fireworks, thinking that the kick went through the uprights and they won the game, was so awkward and painful for everybody.
Yeah.
Obviously, there'll be a little bit of a lapse, or won't be immediately after it happens. But that was I was cringing in the press box when that happened last year.
I got to tell you, if you're the fireworks guy and Minnesota's down 5-0 in the second half of this game or something like that, the intrusive thoughts about, if I push the button now, this match might get abandoned. And there's a big red button right there. I can't imagine having to deal with that level of temptation.
We just decided to light them off at halftime.
Yeah, we thought
It's not even
halftime was the
dark
perfect
yet.
time for these fireworks.
So yeah, as you guys said, as you pointed out, there will be fireworks after the match, win or lose. That's just the way it is. So
And not even Sandro Schwartz fireworks, actual
Yes.
fireworks.
actual legitimate fireworks that you would see coming up on Friday night, except these will be on Tuesday night outside of Allianz Field in St. Paul. Looking forward to it. Plenty of games coming up. We'll have plenty to discuss next week, guys. Really appreciate you guys stopping by and filling in for Manny Lagos while he was out for the week. And we will see you at Allianz Field coming up on Tuesday.
Which one of us was filling in for Manny and which one of us was just us? Did you decide that, Jonathan?
Thanks to the production staff of Grace Dearson, Kyle Hayward, Evan Entler for putting this on every week. We'll talk to you next week, Loons fans.